Alrighty guys, we are back to talk about episode Heresy and why it was the greatest episode in the Destiny 2 episodic saga. So for those of you who don't know, after the final shape, Bungie basically promised us 3 episodes instead of seasonal content. I've already made 2 videos, one going over episode Echoes and one going over episode Revenant. Now we get to talk about episode Heresy, in my opinion, the only good episode that Bungie actually gave us. To understand why Heresy hit differently than the other episodes, you first have to understand how Bungie deals with seasonal content as it pertains to Destiny 2. Most of the time, the last season in a DLC that Bungie introduces is the hardest hitting season, because it's kind of like a send-off for that respective DLC. It's like, hey, this DLC launched, we got, 3 or 4 seasons or whatever, so the final season always kind of hits the hardest. Season of the Wish is a good example of this in recent times, and episode Heresy is no exception. It is by far the most content-packed episode. It is full of content. There is still stuff that I could be running right now, despite Edge of Fate coming around in 2 days from now at the time of me recording this video. Episode Heresy was great, okay, and we're going to talk about why. Now, Act 1 of Episode Heresy launched with the Nether activity and the Derealize exotic quest. The Derealize exotic quest rewarded you with the Barrow Dyad, which is one of the most fun SMGs to use in the entire game, but it is also an exotic SMG. So unfortunately, there is not a ton of great exotic SMGs that have earned that exotic slot. I would say Barrow Dyad is probably one of our best exotic SMGs though, in my opinion. So I don't know, a cool weapon. And the Nether, the first activity that launched with episode Heresy, once again in Act 1, was an activity where you storm the Dreadnought, you complete several different activities on the Dreadnought. Essentially, you start in one of like 3 or 4 areas. I think they actually have 4 or 5 areas now on the Dreadnought. But the game randomly picks 3 of these areas and makes you complete 3 different objectives in each of these areas. And throughout this, you get more and more loot as you kind of keep going, and at the very end, you get a ton of loot. It felt very rewarding, especially with the Tome of Want, I think it was called. It was kind of this item that Bungie allowed you to attune to different loot, so you could target farm the machine gun for episode Heresy, for example, which is what I've been going after. I have not been able to get a god roll yet, believe it or not, despite how much I play. But it was cool that Bungie let us kind of target different loot and stuff with the Tome of Want. You're also getting just different random rewards from running the Nether. The Nether was, in my opinion, a great activity, and I've grossly simplified it, by the way, for the purpose of explaining it to you guys. There's all kinds of secrets in the Nether. I believe there's something like 55 secrets or something. There is chests everywhere in each of the sections of the Nether that reward you different weapons. They give you these like shard things that you use to unlock things in episode Heresy. There's also those like little Pokeball things, like they're not like Pokeball like Pokemon, but like it's like a ball with like spikes coming off of it, and you can use that to get the, I can't remember which season they're from, but like reprised weapons for episode Heresy. All sorts of stuff going on in the Nether activity that we didn't really have in any of the other episodes. None of the other activities were really that deep. The closest thing we had to the Nether was like the Echoes seasonal activity, which, was not really that great, if we're being honest here. The Nether is one of the best activities that Destiny 2 has ever had, in my opinion. I know a lot of people kind of look at the Nether and they're like, it could have been better, but it's like, yeah, but it definitely could have been better, but we have to appreciate how great the Nether really was. Like, we did not think that this activity was going to be very good, especially coming right on the heels off of Echoes and Revenant that were massive flops, which I've already talked about. Expectations were low for episode Heresy, and I know like a lot of the YouTubers can make it seem like maybe Heresy wasn't that great, but looking back on it, it really was great, man. Like, there was a few times where we were like, there's, maybe there's not enough content to carry us to Edge of Fate. But looking back on it, I'm remembering it quite fondly, and I don't remember playing and being like, oh, this sucks, like like I did with Revenant and Echoes. I probably have more playtime in episode Heresy than I do if you take Echoes and Revenant and times them by 2 or 3. Like, I have a lot of playtime in episode Heresy. Now, I know Heresy lasted for longer, but I'm telling you, even adjusted for that, I have a lot more playtime in Heresy than most other seasons and all of the episodes. Episode Heresy was great. However, I'm not just here to glaze episode Heresy, all right? We actually have to talk about the content that was in the game. I'll mention it before we hop over to what was in Act 2, just because otherwise I'm going to forget to mention it, but the Lodestar Trace Rifle was one of the exotics that was actually introduced with episode Heresy. You got it from the season pass. I believe it was the first tier. The Lodestar Trace Rifle is really cool, and the thing that makes it worth using, even though it's an exotic trace rifle, which is kind of gimmicky, and you're like, oh, do I really want to waste my exotic slot on a trace rifle? If you're a trace rifle guy, you definitely want to waste your exotic slot on this trace rifle, because guess what, guys? Guess what? This thing has infinite ammo, okay? That's right, a trace rifle with infinite ammo. Believe it or not, I believe that's how all trace rifles should be. I think that would be the only way they're actually useful. But Bungie did put this in the game with the Lodestar Trace Rifle, so that thing has infinite ammo. It's a primary ammo weapon. Once again, in my opinion, I think all trace rifles should be that way, but you can also charge it up by getting kills with it, I believe, and then unleash like a massive beam of destruction, which is its exotic perk. It's a fun gun, okay, and it was the first tier in the season pass, so that thing alone, I got hours out of just laser beaming people with that thing in PvP. I know you guys are going to be mad at me, but let me tell you, it was a great time, all right? Believe me. Act 2 launched, okay, guys? And it introduced Court of Blades. I believe each of the acts, by the way, Act 2 and Act 3, introduced more areas to the Nether. Could be wrong about that, but it definitely seemed that way. The Nether activity changed throughout the acts. There was more activities in each area. There was new areas. That was another thing that I think Bungie did really well, was updating the Nether with new stuff every act. I thought that was a very nice touch. But Court of Blades was kind of like a boss gauntlet where you would go in, kill a boss, go back, pick like buffs and kind of like debuffs sort of thing. You would spend tokens on these buffs, and then you would go back in, kill more bosses, get more of those tokens to spend on more buffs, and basically just see how far you could go within like 10 or 12 minutes or something like that. Court of Blades was essentially just a boss gauntlet with like buffs that you could purchase with tokens. A lot of people had high hopes for this activity, but I personally wasn't a huge fan of it. I did enjoy it. I'm not going to say it's a bad activity. I just felt like the areas were so samey, and it was such a simple objective of like, all right, go in and kill everything as fast as you can, especially the boss. I did play it. I did farm it quite a bit. It was fun, but there wasn't enough there for me to enjoy it a ton. I get why they introduced Court of Blades. It was more of like they described it as like, oh, you can like turn your brain off and just go through some bosses with a couple other people in a match-made team. It was more of a chill activity than the Nether for sure, in my opinion. But once again, Court of Blades was not like my primary activity. I was a huge Nether fan. Court of Blades was not bad by any stretch of the imagination, I want to be clear, but it just was not my cup of tea. I think Bungie did a good job with it though, but that was the main highlight of Act 2. I was still doing stuff from Act 1 in Act 2, by the way, so I was not like super eager to like jump into Court of Blades right away. I was just kind of like farming the Nether, trying to get god rolls, you know, finishing up like Barodiad stuff. I think a lot of the Barodiad stuff was actually locked to each act. So you would get the Barodiad upgraded to like a certain amount, and then it was like, hey, you have to wait till Act 2. So there was also that, and I was super focused on trying to get the Barodiad fully upgraded because it was kind of a pain. Like nobody really knew what we were doing. You would get stuck on these parts that required you to go to like a certain area of the Nether that you couldn't necessarily get to right away. I know that people are probably going to comment on that. If I don't talk about that, they're going to be like, you're only talking about the good parts of episode Heresy. Remember when we had to get to that one part of the Nether and it took you 8 hours to do that? Like, it never actually took me that long. I think people kind of exaggerated how long like the Barodiad quests took a little bit. But it did take a while, and there was a lot of bugs with the Barodiad quests, so I will say Bungie could have done better with that whole thing. But still, overall, like, looking back on it, I still remember it fondly. You might have a different experience if you had, like, a super bugged quest issue or something, but I think Bungie did pretty good overall. The one thing that I remember had tons of bugs, and it seemed like people just weren't able to complete it when it came out and stuff, were the Barodiad quests, just because the parameters for unlocking certain things were so specific and required, like, very specific encounters to occur in specific areas of the Nether, and it just seemed like they definitely could have done better with that. But once again, Act 2 was basically like Act of Court of Blades. Okay, Court of Blades was what everyone was playing during Act 2. They were also, once again, upgrading their Barodiad, etc. Keep in mind throughout all of these acts as well, different Heresy weapons are releasing. Contrary to a lot of the other episodes, most of the Heresy weapons are actually pretty good. Like, Adamantite was the second healing frame auto rifle, I believe. That thing slaps. Psychopomp was one of the first area denial grenade launchers. I believe it was the third or maybe fourth. So Psychopomp is really cool. We also got the Vault of Glass reprised gear. I think that came with Act 1, by the way, and I forgot to mention that. I'm just trying to think of everything that we got during episode Heresy. There was so much stuff, guys, that honestly, I can't even think of all of it. Oh, that's right. We did have Guardian games, I think, in Act 2, and we did have more, like, there was quite a few events and stuff during Heresy, mainly just because it was so long, but I'll talk about that. A lot of that stuff happened in Act 3. The Derealize exotic mission, I haven't really said much about it, purely because it was on the Dreadnought, and it was pretty difficult when it first came out. I thought it was pretty good. Like, I really liked it. I didn't play it like 10 times or anything like I did the Revenant exotic mission, but that's mainly because I didn't have to. Like, in Revenant, we didn't have anything to do, so I was like, hey, why don't we run Kel's Fall again? Heresy just had so much content that if you didn't have to run something, you were doing something that you had to run, or you were farming for something that you wanted, which in my opinion is signs of a strong season if people are playing it how they want, focusing on the things that they feel they want to play, instead of just, oh, I guess I have to play this mission because that's what we have. So Act 3 launches, and it brings with it a lot of like seasonal story stuff. I don't really remember if Act 3 had like a whole lot of, I don't think it had like an exclusive activity that launched with Act 3 actually, but I do remember the Nether changing quite a bit in Act 3. There was a lot of new stuff going on. They might have even updated parts of Courts of Blades. Somewhere throughout this whole thing, Sundered Doctrine launched, and some of you are going to be mad that it took me this long to mention this, but Sundered Doctrine was, it wasn't that it was a bad dungeon, okay? It was just like the Salvation's Edge of dungeons, in my opinion. It's not that any of the encounters were particularly hard. It was just that the mirror encounter at the very beginning was so tedious that nobody on my friends list and nobody that I really play with really wanted to run it very often. We were like, oh yeah, Sundered Doctrine, huh? Yeah, mirrors. Yeah, I think not today, guys. Let's just play the Nether. So I do want to clarify, Sundered Doctrine is not a bad dungeon, and the Finality's Auger, the exotic linear fusion rifle that comes with it, is not a bad weapon. I actually did end up getting it, and I think the thing slaps hard, especially with the Catalyst, which I believe is bait and switch. But I kind of like wrapped up everything with Sundered Doctrine, and while I wish I could have gotten like more god rolls from it, once I had the Finality's Auger and the Catalyst, I was like, yeah, I'm probably not touching that again, specifically because of the mirrors. All of the other encounters, great encounters in my opinion, but Bungie, please don't do another mirror encounter. I beg you. I'll also mention Bolt Charge here simply because I've seen it used all over the place. Like, most of the builds being done in episode Heresy have something to do with Bolt Charge. Even the Titan, like, block and kill everything build is using Bolt Charge. Like, you can put your barricade down as the Titan, stand behind it. So if you're blocking with like a stronghold build and like a strand sword with redirection and flash counter, it just goes crazy. That's been my primary, like, Titan build. I know people are going to be like, Nick, you know, that's not cool. That's too easy. Look, man, if I'm not using something that's fun to me, then it's not worth using, all right? I've had more fun using that Titan build than any other build. So I just want to say that Titan thing with the stronghold and the blocking with the sword, that was fun as hell, man. People gave Aztecross such a hard time for that too, and I just want to say, y'all are wrong about that whole thing, bro. Aztecross, I don't know, he got it going on with that sword build, bro. I know he didn't create it, by the way. I'm just saying, like, he took a lot of the flack because he made it popular. So Act 3, once again, didn't come with any, like, massive changes to episode Heresy, I don't think, but there were some events that happened later in Act 3, like, even right now, like the Rite of the Nine event with the dungeons, that have made Act 3 one of the best acts of episode Heresy, in my personal opinion. So Rite of the Nine released, and honestly, like, I think people were mad at first when Rite of the Nine came out, because a lot of us were thinking that Rite of the Nine was going to launch and you'd be able to just kind of like pick whichever dungeon you wanted to run. Bungie made it where you could only play like a certain dungeon every week, of course, because Bungie just loves rotators. People were mad about this, and a lot of people basically said they weren't going to play Rite of the Nine because of that. Regardless, episode Heresy had like historic player numbers, at least for this specific episode, all because of Rite of the Nine, in my opinion. They did knock it out of the park with Rite of the Nine as far as like the loot and stuff goes. It feels like there's something to earn in each of the dungeons specifically from this event that's worth using, in my opinion. Like redoing the No Survivors SMG, for example, to have incandescent heal clip. That was a great decision, in my opinion, and that thing is so fun to use. So yeah, Rite of the Nine was pretty cool. They also made it like really accessible to get all of the different exotics associated with each of these dungeons, or at least a couple of them. Like I remember them basically just giving away either Hierarchy of Needs or the Navigator, which I was actually kind of tilted about because that thing took me like 65 runs to get. So I was like, you're telling me that I didn't have to run that dungeon 65 times if I just waited? Oh, okay. In addition to Rite of the Nine, we also had the Heavy Metal PvP mode. I wasn't super into this simply because the PvP was so floaty with the vehicles, but basically Heavy Metal, if I'm remembering right, you would launch into a game and there would be like 3 Brigs and 3 tanks. You would either be on the tanks team or the Brigs team, and you basically just beat the hell out of each other, and whoever got the most kills would win, your team or the enemy team. That event was really cool, and the titles that were associated with it, a lot of people were grinding for, but that just didn't really strike me. Like, I wouldn't be mad if they did another one of those events. I just felt like they could have done more with that. Like, maybe do different modes, but make it Brig versus tank still. Like, I don't know. Maybe I'm just being picky, but it was a cool event nonetheless. I will say that. We already talked about a little bit Guardian Games being in Act 2. Guardian Games is never really that big, but one of the things that I will mention was going back to the Leviathan was a cool nostalgia trip, I'll tell you that much. Especially running through the little holes and everything, like when you get teleported into the gauntlet run area and you're just kind of running through. And I don't know, it was just a cool thing going back to all these different locations that we've been at throughout the Destiny 2 story. I will say, Bungie, you guys did surprise me with Guardian Games. I know there's only so much they can do for like a Guardian Games type event, but I think they did a decent job. A lot of people were crapping on it like, oh, you know, of course we're just going to these recycled locations. And it's like, guys, if they brought back the Leviathan in full, everybody would be happy. You guys can pretend all you want that like, oh, recycled game, but don't lie. We all want to go back to the Leviathan, okay? If they brought back the Menagerie instead of a new seasonal activity, I wouldn't even be mad, bro. And I don't think a lot of people would be mad either. I think you'd have a lot of people come back to play it. I guess it's worth mentioning there was like a Star Wars collaboration thingy mabobber, and also one of the last things that I will mention is No Land Beyond, which you could get if you ordered the like Ultimate Edition of Edge of Fate. I will say No Land Beyond is really fun to use, especially in Destiny 2. But people talked it up like if it was this mythical weapon, and now that it's out, you really don't see that many people using it. I knew it was kind of going to go that way, but I just thought it was funny that people were talking it up so much, like when they figured out it was going to be coming back. And I don't ever really remember seeing a whole lot of people use that thing, to be honest. Like, yeah, I did see people use it, but now you don't see anyone using it, at least in my opinion. There were some new abilities throughout episode Heresy, like the, you know, Storm's Keep thing. I think we talked about that a little bit, like Bolt Charge. The Ionic Sentry for Warlock, which was basically like a sentry that they could throw out and it would just shock stuff around the area. I can't really remember what On the Prowl was for Hunter. I don't think I ever even used it, but Hunter got a new Void aspect. There was just a ton of content in episode Heresy, you guys. I know people are going to say that I'm glazing Bungie with this video, but when I tell you that episode Heresy had some of the most fun content that I've ever played in Destiny 2, I truly do mean that. So somehow me and my infinite wisdom, I completely forgot to mention the community chess puzzle that happened during episode Heresy, and also the chess piece hunt for Act 3. I think that's when all that launched. I noticed that I didn't include this in the video while I was editing, so I'm putting it here now. I didn't specifically do the entire chess puzzle, to be honest. I ended up doing a cheese, which allowed you to get the community chess puzzle completed and claim the rewards, like the emblem and Taken shader, which they gave you for completing the puzzle. But yeah, Bungie asked us to go round up a bunch of chess pieces for an emblem, a shader, and I think maybe there was a ship and some alloys? How very Bungie of you, Bungie. I'm half joking, alright guys? The community chess puzzle thing was fun for some people, I'm sure. Just not me, personally. Another thing I forgot to mention was the roguelite features of the Nether, somehow. I left that out. That's actually a really big part of the Nether. After some encounters in each of the areas of the Nether, they would drop these little orbs, and you could go up to them and kind of check them out, see which one you wanted to get, and pick them up for buffs and debuffs. For example, there were some where you would get more weapon damage, but you'd also take more damage. On others, they were things like you could run faster, but you would also take more damage. Just cool little stuff like that. Very relevant in my opinion, so I figured I'd drop that here since I forgot about other stuff. But yeah, I think that just about wraps it up. Let me know what you guys think, though, down below in the comments. I would love to hear. We'll see you guys for our next video after Edge of Fate launches. I'm going to be giving my thoughts on it and just letting you guys know where we're going to go from here with the channel. Hope to see you guys back on the channel. If you did enjoy this video, make sure you leave a like, comment, and subscribe. Most of the people that actually watch my videos are not subscribed, so if you did subscribe and turned all notifications on, I would greatly appreciate it. We'll see you guys next video, and peace out.